Yep. Okay, we're live. Hello, happy Friday, Sister Shannon.
Happy Friday, Brother Roy. Is it Happy Friday?
It's as happy as it can be. It's
Well,
as happy as it can be.
Yeah, you were telling me a little bit about what's going on. Do you want to talk about it?
Well, first let's say hello to everybody. Hello, everybody coming in and hanging out with us and watching Red Hoop Talk. This is our 6th episode. Am I correct?
I don't know.
I think it's our 6th episode. So
5th or 6th,
we're chugging right along, and we've got one person in there watching us now. So let's see if we can get our room filled up.
Bring
I'm
your
going to
friends.
turn the comments on. Yeah. So first of all, like we always do, we want to. My name is Roy. I'm Cato Adeas from Louisiana, and this is my sister Shannon. She's Choctaw from Oklahoma, and she's now currently living in Washington D.C. and Maryland area, and I currently live in the greater Los Angeles area.
Transplant.
So we want to thank the first peoples whose land we stand on, as we always do on our show, and I'll let you have your say too, Shannon.
And recognize their importance and their continuing importance in our lives, and our make sure that we are remembering them and recognizing them in all we do. So thank you, everyone. Welcome. You know what, Roy? I meant to actually bring some sage with me today. I really appreciated Brian Frejo in one of our last shows that he actually had some sage and burned some sage with us. And I thought, well, you know what? That would be a really good way. Oh, are you going to leave me here by myself? That would be a really good way to just kind of get settled and start. If we could just maybe have a little medicine with us at the beginning. Oh, well, now's a good time for a joke. I wish I had a good one. Don't have my karaoke microphone with me, or I could blow out some Joan Jett or something. Well, let me just start with a little news. I wanted to let everyone know that some congratulations are in order for the Shinnecock Nation. The Shinnecock.
I'm back.
Won
I'm
a
back.
court case.
I didn't leave you hanging.
I'm talking.
I did.
Shinnecock won a court case this week. Are we going to do?
I don't have a lighter, so.
You don't have a, well, at least we have that. That's important, even if we can't burn it. So I was talking about how the Shinnecock won a court case. You know, we hardly win court cases. So when a good court case comes, we do want to talk about it. The Shinnecock are in New York State, and their lands are right next to the Hamptons, where all these rich people from New York City come to vacation and shop. And so the Shinnecock have this this small piece of land that they've put this huge electronic sign on that's right next to the freeway where folks drive from New York City to the Hamptons. So they are able to really build their economic development opportunities through this big neon sign, by selling, Gucci and all these other advertisers who want to use their space. So it's been a really positive economic development for them when they don't have gaming and other things. Of course, the state of New York sued them. We're trying to get an injunction to stop them and get their sign to be brought down. Well, the Shinnecock won, and New York weren't allowed to stop. Yes, that's so important, because usually if you can win at that temporary injunction stage, it's pretty clear you'll likely win, because the burden to get a temporary injunction is pretty. It's pretty difficult to.
Even I know that.
Yeah. So we're really happy about that. Congratulations, Shinnecock. And you can find the news story. I think if you Google it, you'll find it pretty easily.
So they actually live there by the Hamptons, huh?
Yeah. And their sacred sites are constantly being part of developments, housing developments, and they're constantly fighting out there with the Hamptons.
Funny is, when I talk to people, they don't understand Indian country. They go, why do you Indian people always have their land and their reservations and their places out in the middle of nowhere? Why are they always out there? There's nothing out there. No wonder they're in so much trouble. I was like, are you kidding me? We lived in the best places. We got kicked out. What are you talking about? We lived all up and down the beach here. That was beachfront property. We were all out there. What are you talking about?
Oh yeah.
They think it's just the mentality of some people. That's like, no, we lived in the good places. We left that shit alone. We weren't in those places until we got pushed into those places. Oh yeah. Why did they live out in the middle of nowhere like that? No wonder they're in trouble.
We lived in the Hamptons. We lived on the beach. We lived on the sides. Yeah.
Up on the hills, over the lakes, all that good stuff.
Mm-hmm. So, well, hey.
Good for the Shinnecocks. All right.
So we don't have a lighter, right? So we can't burn sage this time. But maybe let's start a little practice to open up to get us going in a good way here. Let me share with some folks. I'm going to share my screen here if I can do it smoothly. I'm sharing the Association on American Indian Affairs website. I wanted to make folks aware of a couple of opportunities we have. For those of you who are students, we do have scholarships available. And the applications are due on June 15th.
Oh,
so
I got to get my son to fill his out.
Absolutely. And we are the only, I believe, organization that gives undergraduate and graduate Native student scholarships to folks from federally recognized tribes as well as non-recognized tribes. So if you're able to prove that you are enrolled with your tribe, whether or not it's been recognized by the U.S. government, you can apply for our scholarship. And this year we're actually partnering with, with the American Indian College Fund, so that we can provide more support for our students. So we're happy about that partnership. And then the other grant we have available, it's also due on, you still have this up there, right, Roy? Yeah. That's also due on June 15th is our Native Youth Summer Camps. We give some funding to Native Youth Summer Camps that are run by Native organizations, by tribes, that work with Native youth on culture, on health. This year, because of COVID, we're requiring folks to show how they're going to maintain, social distancing and other, health requirements for our youth to keep them protected. So please, if you're a tribe and maybe need a little extra funding this year for your youth, if you run a regular Native Youth Summer Camp, please come and fill out our application. So yeah, thanks for letting me share that. I wanted to make sure that folks knew about those opportunities that the association has. And another thing that I wanted to talk about, Roy, before I want to get back to your thing, but this may be a good discussion. Monday's Memorial Day.
Mm-hmm.
And Memorial Day is a hard day for Indian country because it's a commemoration of people who've died from wars. And Native Americans are known to be have joined the Army and Navy and Air Force, Marines. They've been a part of service in larger numbers than any other race or group. But not only that, I'm going to pull up an article. I really want to, it's from 2019, but it's still a really relevant article. And it's from our friend from Native News Online, his news show. Levi Rickert, who was with us last week.
Yeah,
But
Levi.
is this the wrong one?
No, that's his paper.
Yeah. Did I get the right? Yeah, Native Perspective on Memorial Day. This is an excellent article. So if you can find this on Native News or online, or Google Native Perspective on Memorial Day, it's a great article that talks about a history of Native American service to our country, but not only that, it also talks about how the current administration often talks about its enemies in war. Here it is. Countries and their leaders tend to speak in terms of absolutes, and the U.S. is no different. On Monday, we'll be honoring our country's fallen soldiers. President Trump, in an overly broad statement, implied that all of our nation's enemies were evil when he said, "We pay tribute to those brave souls who raced into gunfire, roared into battle, and ran into hell to face down evil." And in a tweet on the same day, Speaker Ryan stated that the USA is the greatest force for freedom that the world has ever known. Well, the maps above and at least 12% of the total medals of honor awarded by this country do not support President Trump and Speaker Ryan's broad glorifying statements. In fact, what's lacking is that those medals often came as a result of the genocide against Native America. And so those medals of honor that were given often were against us. And so it's Memorial Day. I guess what I'm trying to say, Roy, and you may have a better perspective on this, is
I just have a different perspective.
well, it's a double-edged sword kind of thing. Am I saying that right? I mean, it's
no. To the perspective, it's a double-edged sword, but to my native heart and my native soul and everything that I am and that my elders were that taught me, they were all warriors, and it's just part of who we are. You know, when I went into the Marine Corps, it was there were more natives in the Marine Corps than I realized, that I thought would be, because, when you're here and you're in the powwow arena and you're in Indian country in your own community or whatever, you see native people, and you interact with them. But in the general population, you don't, unless you actually go to these events, hang around your family, be around the people. But when I went in the Marine Corps, I was surprised at how many there were. And then every time I go to a powwow or I go to church, like you and I were part of the Native American church out here with Little Crow, they were all military, and it all goes back to the warrior spirit in all of us. I think a lot of us men, that was our rite of passage, because let's face it, pop culture today, there isn't a rite of passage. We talked about this a little bit before, and why the gun culture is so strong, and why the hate culture is so strong, and why all these young men are out there doing such evil things with that energy, that young energy that they have. And I think it's just misplaced. And I think that it's part of that warrior spirit that's in all of us men when we're young, and having a place for that to be an outlet, and to be able to honor that, and to be able to protect the land. Because, when I, as a Native person, look at the flag, I don't necessarily think of, Abraham Lincoln and Mankato and the founders and what they did to natives, and the atrocities that this government has perpetrated on Indian country. But I think of, my commitment to this land. I'm still here. My family's still here. I'm still committed to the land that I stand on and the people that owned it before, or caretook. I shouldn't say own, but caretook of this land. Mm-hmm. I honor that with that flag. I honor that with my service in the Marine Corps as a warrior. I honor that by serving all of those Native people out there that are U.S. citizens, which is all of us. We have dual citizenship. So I look at it in that respect. Also, Memorial Day is all of those people that we've lost in Native America that served as I did in that capacity. All of the code talkers, I think now, I think we even lost our last code talker. We may have one or two more, I'm not sure, but I thought we just lost our last code talker. So, the way I see it is, yes, it could be a double-edged sword. We could look at it and look at that article and go, well, hey, really, what are we honoring here? When in all actuality, if we look at it as Native people, this is what we're honoring. I could care less about all that other stuff. I served under that flag, and I served for this land, and I served for the people that have stood here for millennia. So that's my perspective on it. It's not going to be a day of mourning or a sad day for me about any country. It's going to be a day of honor for me.
Thank you, Roy. Thank you for sharing that. But now, how do you feel considering that and considering what where your paycheck is right now?
What fair leader said, you mean? You just cut out real quick there.
Oh, no, I guess what I was asking is, considering that and the service to your country that you've given and others like you have given, but now you're facing something that kind of goes directly to that. You're not able to get unemployment because of COVID and the failure of the government to really have a good process so that you can survive.
Well, yeah, I mean you're
not the only one in this situation, and especially being a veteran.
I'm having trouble. We're cutting out, so I'm having trouble hearing you.
Okay.
And make sure everything's good here. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think what you were saying is that, how do I feel being in the situation we're in, what the government has kind of screwed up and the situation that they put in. Well, they've been putting us in that situation for the last 500 years. So it's nothing new. The fact that we are going through this pandemic and we're peaking, Navajo Nation, kind of representing what's going on in Indian country and mainstream, has put some big restrictions out, and they've started to turn their curve down. So they're actually, doing well. I can't say they're doing well. I said they're starting to change the curve, or flatten the curve, they call it. And then what I don't understand is, and it's turned into a political mess, being if you wear a mask, you're a liberal sympathizer. If you don't wear a mask, you're a radical, right winger. And it's turned into this war. And that's not what this is all about. What this is really all about is we should be coming together and doing the right things. When this thing is peaking, you don't go, oh, okay, it's all over with. It's peaking. It's the last thing you want to do is say it's all over with. And it's okay, let's all go out and mingle. What they were trying to put in place was kind of working. I mean, the numbers are showing that we're the worst off in the world. We've already screwed it up. We've got, I think, what is it, a million plus cases now?
Yeah.
And over coming close to 100,000 deaths or something. I think we're supposed to hit that by this weekend. And now everybody's acting like everything's okay. It's fine. Go ahead and go back outside and go hang out. I think we're in for some more trouble here on this thing. And I just hope that Indian country continues to do what they're doing and make progress and turn this thing the other way, because they were hit hard. They were hit really hard.
Right.
And I hope they can turn it around and kind of ignore what's going on out here, because in California, it's turning into a shit show. I mean, it is insane what's happening out here. I mean, they're literally, half the people are saying, hey, everything's okay, and the other half are trying to lock down and still stay out of the mess. So,
well, in South Dakota, the governor of South Dakota is Well, she threatened litigation against the Cheyenne River Sioux and the
Yes.
Oglala because they have checkpoints on federal roads that go into their reservation. So these federal roads are built on easements. Basically, they have easements to pass through tribal lands, and the tribe wants to protect itself, and it has the inherent sovereign right to do so. So they've set up checkpoints that require people to potentially do health tests or to, verify that they're coming in because of essential services. And if not, they're told to turn around or use another road to get to where they're going. But the governor has now went to President Trump and said, help us open up our roads. And my biggest concern is that the administration taking, it would not be a surprise if this administration just said,
yeah,
check off their jurisdiction. We don't need their jurisdiction.
Well, he's already saying that he's going to start taking jurisdictions away from governors and rights away from governors, and he's going to,
I don't understand that. That's exactly what he ran against.
No, that's what Republicans run against. People forget that this guy is not a Republican. Donald Trump is not a Republican. They've had to take ownership of him, and I think they're in a world of shit because of it. But no, he's not. And yes, Republicans for forever. Well, for the last 60 years, 70 years or so, 80 years, they've ran on the fact that states are independent of the federal government and they have sovereign rights. It's funny, they want sovereign rights. They don't want to give Native people sovereign rights, but they want their sovereign rights.
Yeah, they can't. The tribes can't assert their own sovereign rights.
So they're in this weird spot. It seems like the poor Republican Party is like in this spot where they've got all these values and things, but then they've got this leader that doesn't have any of those same values that they have, and they've got to support him 100%. It is the weirdest circus I've ever seen. I mean,
but it goes absolutely against their own
I know
platform.
They've got to be like, I mean, this it's probably the end of the Republican Party. I
thought you were going to say it's probably the end of the world.
No. I know that's not the case.
Man,
I have hopes for the future. I think that we're getting ready to move into the future. And with that, let's move into the future of our show, because we've got a guest sitting in the back, and I feel horrible that he's been sitting there this whole time just listening to us chat about ridiculousness.
I think he's laughing at us with what he's doing. I think
we
all the ways he could make fun of us right now. And
I'm going to let you bring up real quick. I want to say a shout out to our chatter. Who is SG? Do we know who SG is?
I don't know what SG stands for.
Well, SG has been in our chat room every show from Colorado, and has said good evening to us. So shout out to SG. Thanks for sitting there and listening to us every Friday. We appreciate
Thanks for recognizing the land that you're standing on of the Cheyenne and Ute
yes.
nations there. So yeah, thanks SG. Let us know who you are someday.
So why don't you introduce our guest?
I will. So I want to introduce everyone to Leonard Harjo. He is the former chief of the Seminole Nation of Oklahoma. I have been honored to know him through his wife, Sheila Harjo. But also, when I got to know Leonard some years back, we both realized that we grew up in the same place, in a place called Wolf, Oklahoma. Where the Panthers
run free and get run over by trucks.
The Panthers run free. And so without further ado, let's bring in Leonard so he can talk about him.
Hey, Chihuntamo. Is that how you say it, Leonard?
No, it's Stongo.
Jongo. Oh man, I messed it up.
I don't know what you were saying, Roy. What were you saying?
Say it again.
Stongo.
Okay. I was wrong.
Might have been thinking about Governor Anatubby, but
yeah, that sounded more Chickasaw or something. What you just said.
One of the two. But,
yeah.
I googled it.
It was definitely interesting listening to your conversation. But I thought, I don't know where that one's going, but
Yeah,
I
man.
was trying to derail it as quickly as possible because it was going to go nowhere. Actually,
Thanks a lot. I don't know why we've got to fix the beginning of our show to get us in a lighter mode. I keep saying we got to tell some jokes, but Roy's just funny looking, and he doesn't think I'm funny, so that doesn't work.
You ain't funny a little bit.
But Leonard, on the other hand, I've seen him carry a room, telling jokes, stories, but also, being serious and laying down the law. So I'm really grateful to have you here with us, Leonard, and to talk about what you've done as a Seminole tribal member in your life and how you got where you are today.
Well, it's interesting, and thank you, Shannon and Roy, for inviting me to be on your show today. One of the interesting things that I've always told people is that I owe a lot to where I grew up, and that was the little community of Wolf. A couple of things is we were all poor. There were, kind of a mixed group. There were a couple of black families, predominantly Indian families, mostly my family at that time in the Wolf community, and non-Indians. And it seemed like everything was, really good. We grew up, we spent a lot of time together, really didn't. And this is in the 1960s when a whole lot of turmoil was going on, you could see on TV. Yeah. But it seemed like to us, everyone that grew up there, and some years later, my daughter was going to school at Strother High School in northern Seminole County, and one of her friends played on the basketball team with her. Her dad was a friend of mine from Wolf, and they started talking, and they said, "Do you have to listen to those Wolf stories too?" Yes. so those of us that grew up at that time, anyway, thought it was the greatest place to grow up, and I still do, but it's not really a place that I can live at this point, or even most people can live because of where it's located. Right. Cell phone service is awful. Telephone service in general isn't very good, so I'm not sure what the internet's like out there. I've not really tried to connect out in that area, but don't really have a home there anymore. We're still on land, but don't have a home anymore, so we don't get out there very often. But
and they closed that bridge, right? That bridge doesn't even, they've decommissioned it, right?
Well, the one that's at Salt Creek, they did. Obviously, we have a new highway running through there, so they moved everything, and the new highway doesn't go through Wolf anymore. It goes about half a mile west, so you miss the big metropolis when you travel that way anymore. You just kind of see the sign and you're gone. Metropolis.
There was, when I was growing up there was nothing. I mean, the little gas station that was there was still operating, and I'd always go there and get a strawberry pop. And but the school was still functional. They'd have some meetings. The Baptist church was still functional. But I don't know if anything is really there today.
Not anymore. The school's long gone. I think one or two of the churches may still be, one of the churches may be still going on. The gas station, when Doug Valines was the man that ran it, when he passed away, that closed. And any other businesses there, were long gone. And so it's, there's still people living there, but it's not the community that it was when there was a school there.
Yeah.
And that makes, one of the aspects of living in rural America, and all of what's going on in rural America, loss of jobs, out migration of people in these smaller communities. When you lose your school, your their sense of community for the most part goes with it, and that's a struggle in rural Oklahoma. It's a struggle all over the United States, because how do you have quality education and the amount of money that's required to maintain a school system? And that's a constant struggle, constant battle that everyone faces in that environment.
Yeah.
Legislatures, the school districts, everybody.
Yeah. And
there's
Seminole itself is
Yeah.
struggle. With its high school, I was really sad to hear that the school had to close down and because of asbestos and other issues. But there's just not the kind of funding and the same kind of infrastructure. It's just not as easy.
Yeah. Well, they actually have opened their new school.
Did they?
They built a new one. They had opened it. This would have been their first graduating class out of the new school.
Oh,
And
wow.
So this group missed that opportunity. So there are there's still options and things going on, but in a lot of the communities, Bow Lakes, for example, it still has a school, but how much longer? The state, at some point, the state's going to have to force consolidation in order to try to maximize its some sense of expenditure per student on educational activities, and that's going to hurt a lot of native people who live in these communities. And one of the things that I worried about when I was chief is right now in Seminole County we have about 4 or 5 outside of Wewoka. We still have Sasakwa, New Lima, Bowlegs, Strother, Varnum, Kanawha, and Maud to an extent. Butner at Cromwell. All of those schools are small. In many of those schools, the majority of the population are native. And in those schools, they get to be the stars of basketball, football, baseball. They get to be the salutatorians and valedictorians. When your schools consolidate, which they probably will at some point to 2 or 3 in the county, that means that some of those people who are getting the opportunity to excel and to get it and be put in a position where they believe they can succeed, that opportunity won't be there for them. Because on a basketball team, for example, only 12 people can make the team typically. Instead of having 7 or 8 teams, now you're down to 2. What happens to the others? Right. And that's a challenge that our nation is going to face with its youth in the coming years, because it is going to happen. Those schools will consolidate. The trend toward urbanization, even if it means moving from Sasakwa to Wewoka and Holdenville, that trend is still happening, and it will continue. And that's going to reduce the base of the student base for those schools. And it's a constant challenge to keep them open. And a lot of some of the disadvantages of it, obviously, they don't have the money to have the type of educational programs that's available in the metropolitan urban schools. But I gave you an example of the flip side of it, just where people have an opportunity to excel and that they would not have, and get the attention and get pushed to excel that they wouldn't get in a much, much larger school district. And it's a challenge for the future.
Right. Well, and so saying that, like, what were your opportunities? How did you get to, and why were you even interested in economics of all things? Like how did you get there?
Well, I graduated from 8th grade at Wolf in 1971. I went to high school at Bowlegs and entered school there. And it was a time when people were starting to try to diversify the educational systems all over the place. And my dad was active in Native affairs, both at the tribal level and state level, when I was in the 1960s and 1970s. There was a program called A Better Chance, which still exists, still has the same function. But at that time, they had a much larger Native American orientation than they do now. What they did is they recruited students and helped place them in the major private preparatory schools in the Northeast. and I was able to get into that program. And I finished high school in Massachusetts, and that obviously drastically shifted my perspective on where I was going to go to school, from OU, East Central, to to Harvard, Stanford, Dartmouth, and places of that nature.
Wow. Yeah, that would do it. Yeah, I'm still not quite sure how I made it out of Oklahoma. I left Seminole in 10th grade and then went to Ada High School. And maybe that was part of it. Ada was a little bit bigger than Seminole. What pushed my family out of Oklahoma was the Reagan years, right? So when Reagan came along, my grandparents lost their job. So we had to find somewhere else to go. And that actually forced us to Utah, of all places, but that's another story. And there I was able to go to college and go on from there. But Seminole, it's so beautiful. It's such a nice town. But it still struggles so much. And I just wonder how much of your work as a chief and the things that you do and that you want to do now, what's the solution? What's the way we should be going in these smaller rural areas?
Well, if I had the answer to that, I could fund your organization probably. Seminole County is what I know the most about, although I've traveled extensively and I've seen a lot of rural America, and I see a lot of the same things in those places. But you asked first, and I'm going to have to give you a long answer if I can. You asked first about why I was interested in economics.
Oh yeah.
When I entered college in the late 70s, it was a time of significant change in the way the federal government viewed Indian country, and people were just starting to talk about it mostly in colleges, graduate school, etc. What was going to be the future of Indian country under this new self-determination opportunity? What was going to be the future? Building an economy, a tribal economy, was something that was widely discussed among the people that I went to school with. And now, granted, it's a relatively small group of people there at Harvard, but the things we talked about was being part of that effort, building an economy. And I used some of the information I learned there and applied it looking at where we live, which was Seminole County, and it helped me understand a wide range of things about what was going on in Seminole County. As you know, the post-Seminole Nation period, which ended in 1907, highly agricultural area, as most of the United States was at that time. Oil was discovered and came to Seminole in the early period around early period during World War I, 1916, somewhere in that range. By the 1920s, we're in the middle of a full-fledged oil boom. Mm-hmm. At that time, we were the largest producing oil patch in the world. For a short period of time, we were the largest. What that did, and so there was a huge number of people came in. Wolf School, when my father went to school there, had 200 kids in the high school.
Wow.
When I was in school there were 80 kids in 8 grades. So, it's and all those places that you see, there were actually stores and homes and things of that nature. It was a fairly large community for the day. By the 1950s, there were, I think, 55,000 people in Seminole County in the 1950 census, more or less. Mm-hmm. By 1970, there was 30,000 and declining. Throughout the 60s, everything went down. The whole oil industry, the support industries were on a major decline. we tried to replace that with manufacturing, and we were able, the leadership in Seminole County was able to kind of stabilize stuff for a period until the late 1980s, early 1990s, when the cut and sew industry all shifted south of the border.
Yeah.
So, and what that left us with is we really haven't, but the population in Seminole County for most of the 2000 forward has been about 25,000.
Wow.
It's a fairly low income. It's finally stabilized, if you want to call it that. Hasn't really shrank any, hasn't grown any. And part of that is because of just literally the lack of economic activity there. We've been able to kind of maintain to a degree. The tribe had a part in doing that from between 1971 and late night time I was there. And for the most part, the last 20 years, we've maintained an employment base in Seminole Nation of about at 450 people. And that doesn't include the clinic. That's just the tribe and its related business activity. So, the 500 jobs in a community that size is a pretty good stabilizing force, because the pay levels are pretty decent for the area. But in order and gaming is there, but it's not a panacea for us that it's been for some tribes. And you've got a poor area. Everything is working against you in a number of ways. Educational system is not what you'd like it to have to recruit industry, to bring people in, to retain and keep your best people. If you get educated, they almost have to leave to find employment that's consistent with their earnings expectations. And so you got a range of things that are working really hard against you. And part of what has to happen there is we need to find something that is going to provide income. Pre-1920, pre-oil, it was agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
For most of the 20th century, it was oil. What's it going to be now? That's a challenge.
Yeah.
And no one has that answer. When you look around the United States, Michigan, those places where the Rust Belt, and you go into those areas where manufacturing just left. And
yeah.
What's the answer? What's to replace it? Like I said, if I had the answer to that, I could, I'd be a lot more wealthy than I am now.
I've got some theories. You want to hear some theories?
Sure, go ahead.
Uh-oh. Now it's taking a turn, Leonard. Be careful.
Leonard is an educated financial and economic whiz, so he understands these things, and he's talking about other industries. Usually, people come on this, or when you talk to native country, you hear people talk about gaming as being, the only thing that's going to help Indian country. I don't see it that way. I never have seen it that way. I know that it has done well for a lot of tribes. I know that a lot of tribes have done extremely well. I've got cousins that are very wealthy, because their tribe is giving them money because of that. But I've always thought that kind of the way out was going to be to diversify our economic energy and get it back into manufacturing or doing things like that. But again, we look at the whole country and go, okay, well, where is that going to come from? Is it going to be, how is it going to be agriculture? Look at the agriculture industry right now. Look at the farming industry right now. All these things are in ruin. In my opinion, I think that, all we need is something to do. And, there are necessities, there is food, there are certain services that are necessities. Obviously gaming isn't one of them. But there are necessities that we as a nation need, and bringing those things are one. But then also just having something to do, like why my elder used to always tell me this saying, like, why do dogs have fleas? And I would say, well, the first time he ever said to me, "Oh, why do a dog have fleas?" And he says, "So he has something to do. That's why fleas exist, so the dogs have something to do." And really, as human beings, the only thing that we really have to do is breathe. That's it. Everything else is just fleas. So how are we going to scratch fleas and make economic energy for ourselves? And my answer lately has been, go to Mars. Look at the moon program did to the whole country, and the supporting industries and the technologies and all the things that came out of that. Why not, get ourselves to Mars so that we can start putting these things together and start doing these things and supporting that type of an industry. And, Indian country can be part of it and get involved in the manufacturing of things, because it's yet to be seen, but I don't know what's going to happen. Everything right now is up in the air. The whole country is up in the air as far as, what is our agriculture going to look like? What is our manufacturing industries look like? Service industry is wrecked. The service industry is just absolutely wrecked. Who knows if that'll ever recover anytime soon, so they're going to have to look to other things.
Well, manufacturing, and I was practicing law there for a little bit and doing some economic development work with tribes. And what's really interesting to me is that there's not a stronger push for manufacturing into Indian country instead of going to Mexico, going to China, going to other countries. There's opportunities, and there's also tax incentives that can help U.S. businesses by staying in the U.S. and working in Indian country, learning how to work in Indian country. I think that's the hard thing, is that people are a little bit scared about what that means, even though they'll go to other countries and work there. I don't know, Leonard, if you've ever gotten involved in anything like that, or with non-Indian business, trying to do business in Indian country.
Well,
is that a good can of worms?
Yeah, it's probably a big can of worms, but
I'll bring Sandra's question. That's Sandra, by the way, SG. We'll bring that question.
One of the problems with that, there's actually a little bit of history with that. In the 1970s, I think about 1975, 1976, one of the federal government's be-all, end-all approaches to solving our problems was to build industrial parks in Indian country so that we could recruit industry and place industry. There are EDA developed business parks in just about every reservation all over the country. The vast majority of those, the contract is rotted because no one would ever come. The one at Seminole Nation, which was at Muscogee, we had these beautiful streets, things, and they were built in the 70s, had water and sewer. I built the first building there in that industrial park in 1991. It was a building. It was a tribal building. We built several tribal buildings there utilizing the infrastructure. We had to rebuild the infrastructure there. But part of the problem is location, which is one of the things you mentioned very early on, Roy's location. It's surprising when you build a facility that employs 100 people. You really have to look at, where am I going to get those 100 people? Particularly the types of jobs that you need to have nowadays that have may have more than just basic requirements. Where am I going to get the 100 people, and how am I going to keep them there if they're there? That's been one of the biggest challenges of industrial recruitment in rural Oklahoma, and to the extent in Indian countries there, that's been one of the biggest issues. The other aspect of it is a little bit of what Shannon said is when those industrial parks were built, there were a number of things that occurred. Deals were done. Some of them worked. Some of them didn't. Most of them failed. Many of them didn't. There's a wide range of things have happened, and the between what industry learned and what tribes learned, neither saw the other as very viable business partners. And so you have to overcome that.
Yeah.
There's one of the things, the way industry looks at tribes is that we're very unstable from a political perspective. And by that, I mean, you get a stable regime, so to speak, leadership of a business committee, business, maybe chairman, chief, whatever that might be. And you'll have a good, strong period, 10, 15 years of growth and development because you have stability there. So much of being able to raise capital and other things is still based on kind of personal relationship that you create with someone. And if that can't be achieved or sustained because of the belief of your potential partner that, hey, even if I go through all these things, what it's necessary to do to get a legal document to work with you, and Shannon will tell you that's not easy in Indian country. Many deals have been lost because that couldn't happen in a timely manner. All of those things are working against you. And so you have to spend a lot of time convincing people, yeah, we're a group that we'll do business and we'll stay there. When you achieve that, a lot of growth can occur. And there are examples of that in Indian country. Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma, Chickasaw Nation of Oklahoma, Cherokees. And you go out, look out west, there's places where these things are happening. It's not as widespread as we'd like it to be. And there are places where it really needs to occur that it hasn't happened yet and may not happen because of the location.
Yeah, location, and it's so hard. Like I've found working with tribes sometimes, tribes and their governance can be so fearful of change, even when they've put together some really strong, trusted advisors and laid out a good plan. There's still this fear from the people, and the government. And sometimes it's just difficult to maneuver things. And then sometimes tribes do stupid things and hurt their business credibility in a certain industry. So, it's really difficult. I mean, we really are still in our, I don't want to say infancy, but we're still new to business. And we succeeded quite a bit with gaming, but I think we still have a long way to go to get the legal and the business and the economic infrastructure that we need to really stay successful.
It's been difficult. You really have to have models of governance that reflect your community and what your community will accept. And that's a difficult task when in most Native communities, 2/3 or more of their membership lives outside of the home community and home territory. So, their needs, their wants can be very different. And it makes it very difficult to achieve the type of support for long range, develop, and structure. And that's what it's going to take. You have to be able to look at what you're doing as a multi-generational approach. You really have to look at that 7-generation concept and say, whatever we invest today, we're not talking about reaping the benefits of it necessarily fully in this generation or the next year and beyond. The approach I took in my leadership in my campaign was building the resources and equipping our people with what they would need to survive and thrive. And I guess I should distinguish between survive and thrive. We've been surviving for a long time in Indian country. What we need to get to is thriving, and we need to thrive across all sectors of our communities. Everyone needs to feel like they're thriving, and I wanted our people to be able to thrive in a culturally, sensitive cultural and a Seminole cultural environment. And in an ideal world, that would have meant they would have been able to live and work in Seminole Nation proper, which is more or less Seminole County. We're close there too. Live and work in a Seminole community have the opportunity to go to a Seminole tribal school, be able to be bilingual, speak both languages, if not more. All of the things that you would like to see a global citizen have access to. To get there, what we have to be able to do is keep those warriors, whether they be young warriors, whether they be men or women, home. Most of our native communities are made up of people under 18 and people over 65. All of what you need to build communities, to build businesses, are somewhere else. And unless we can keep those people home, that energy's never there. Never builds your community, never provides the what it takes to build the community. And
makes sense.
And that's what's there now. What will work in Michigan? What would work in Louisiana? What would work in South Carolina, California? All I can say is you've got to be able to tap into that. You got to be able to tap into your cultural history and draw and find those things in your cultural history that made you sovereign and independent. And one of the things that I despise the most about the federal system is that it makes us dependent.
Yes.
We were in the last rendition of the Seminole Nation. We were not, as Seminole people, we weren't dependent on anyone but ourselves. And the structure of responsibility was a lot different. You were responsible for yourself as an individual, to your family, to your clan, to your community, and ultimately to your nation. Not the nation. It wasn't a situation of what's the nation going to do for me. It's what am I going to do for my nation? That's one of the most fundamental things that we have lost in Indian country, for the most part, that we have to recover, is that we're not, as every native culture, tribe I've ever come across, the individual was responsible for themselves, for their health, for their well-being, their health and well-being, and for their sustenance, for what it took to survive. And until we can recover that, and that's our primary approach to life, not waiting for the next handout from the government, whosever government that might be, we're going to continue to struggle with surviving instead of thriving.
That's deep.
Yeah.
And you're right, because we're all to the winds. I haven't been to Louisiana in years, as far as participating in what's going on out there, and I know that a lot of people in California here, a lot of the native people I know are from other nations, and they're living out here, but they're not supporting, like you said, that economic energy, that energy out there that supports the tribe. And when you do go back home and you do see, there's a lot of, like you said, there's a lot of the grandmas and grandpas, and there's a lot of the younger kids there, and a lot of, like you said, the wealth of the tribe itself is to the winds, or in a different town, different place, working for a different government, working for something else, not working within Indian country in their own tribes. You see a lot of that. I never really thought of it until you brought it up.
Yeah. Well, so what is working then? What's working? I mean, I think
Let's turn it down or around.
There are a lot of different things that people do on a variety of different on scales. One of the things you see in those tribes that have been successful in gaming and have a leadership that is looking, well, what do we need to do to really restore our nation? Money takes care of a wide variety of things in terms of being able to support language schools, being able to support housing development, being able to support industrial recruitment. Money attracts money. In the global economy that is now, money attracts money. If you have it, you can attract solid partners with whom you can employ the people you need to make these things work. If you don't have that, it makes it very, very difficult to do. So you're going to have to start from a different perspective, and it's a challenge in an environment where people want instant gratification. It's a real challenge. That's one of the biggest problems I had. I think I had as a chief is we're trying to work, cultivate and work with people for the build for the future, and at the same time, every person walking through the door has an immediate need that you need to deal with. It's more. It's something they have to. They don't come. At least in our tribe, they don't come to see you unless they have You're usually the last resort, and so they have a need that really needs to be addressed. And balancing the resources, regardless of the size of the tribe, balancing the resources between meeting the immediate need and investing for the future, and investing in an environment where you're looking at cultural growth and development, agricultural growth, all of these different things, trying to return to some semblance of who you were and who you want to be going forward. Its critical part is who you want to be going forward, but it helps to understand and have a sense of who you were and who you've been, so that you can bring those things into forward into the 21st century and beyond. We're not going to be able to recreate who we were 150 years ago. We're not even able to recreate who we were 50 years ago. Things are changing that fast, but it has to be based on values, who you understand, good solid understanding of who you are, what it means as a people. Language would help. Knowledge of history and culture would really help. I still get amazed at a number of people that I run across that are Seminole who don't know a lot of the basic historical facts and context of our people.
Yeah, no, when you say that we've, I think that over the last 30 plus years, I would say, as gaming has become more prominent and as tribes have become more monetarily more wealthy, they've been doing the basics, like putting hospitals together and creating health plans and building schools and teaching language and culture. So I think probably that's like phase one, and maybe that's what's been going on for the last 30 years. I haven't myself seen much more economic development other than that, as far as, tribes taking those funds now and starting to reinvest them into other industries, agriculture. And I don't know if you have a better explanation or some examples of that. But manufacturing and agriculture and those kinds of things outside of gaming, tribes investing in that type of stuff.
Well, in agriculture, in order to do successful agriculture, you have to have land. And it's the nature of Indian country that a lot of that land was allotted. A lot of the best agricultural land was lost. And so, many tribes have had to try to reacquire that land in order to have agricultural pursuits. Not everyone agrees with that approach. Membership buying land. and investing in land. You know, that's kind of critical to the development of agriculture. If you have land, if you got the land, there are tribes that have leased agricultural properties. Some have agriculture activities, as far as tribal-owned farms, etc., that are fairly at a large scale. But it's not agriculture. I don't think is a large sector of the economy that it could be in Indian country. In looking at it from where we were in our perspective and what we were looking at and trying to reestablish and reinvigorate agriculture as a source of income in our community. And we were thinking in relative terms, what we were looking at is the vast majority of the land in the Seminole Nation in 1907, 400,000 acres had been allotted to all of my members. 120 acres was the largest individual received. By 2011, we were down to approximately 10,000 acres owned by mostly individuals. There was less than 1,000 acres of tribal trust land. The vast majority of that was individually owned. The majority of those parcels, probably 95% of those parcels, were 40-acre tracts. It was what was known as the Homestead 40. You couldn't sell that and easily, and so it was. There's a lot of that. There's a whole myriad of problems associated with it. Fractionated ownership is one of the major issues with it. But when we examined where we were and what we thought and looked around at our people, and one of the things I charged our planning group to do was find us agricultural opportunities that would utilize 5 acres or less. Because usually on those 40 acres, you might have about 5 to 10 acres of fairly decent agricultural land. And so we looked at a number of things, and we actually settled on, and they came back with a proposal to create a winery business, tribal winery business. And it was predicated on empowering people who would enroll in the program. It was a 1 to 2 acre tract to start. We recruited grape growers among tribal membership, later just anyone in the community, for 5 years running. And we were going to run the winery, we meaning the tribe, and we were going to buy the grapes from the growers. And the way everything was structured, if you had a 1 acre, 2 acre vineyard, it would, on the average, it would produce about $19,000 a year in income for you. And in Seminole County, extra income at the 19,000 level probably would have doubled many of the incomes of our members in that area. It was a small start. We weren't able to see it. I left office, so we weren't able to see it all the way through, completely to fruition, the development of the vineyards all the way through the winery stage. But the concept was looking at how we could get our own people to do something for themselves using part of their resources. And we provided them, we obtained a grant, and we provided them with everything they needed to put a vineyard in place, including training. And again, we were supposed to have bought their produce and ran it through the winery and marketed at the tribal level. I think in Indian country, where you have a lot of individually owned land, working together in a cooperative type environment that doesn't necessarily involve the tribe, could, but it doesn't necessarily have to, is one way of being able to utilize and bring agricultural income back, to the nation and to that community. Because you have to be able to aggregate a fairly large amount of land for it to be profitable. And but most of us don't have it.
Well, the perfect crop for that today is the hemp industry. Hemp is grown almost anywhere now, and it's completely legal, and that industry is starting to boom.
Well, it is, but it isn't.
Yeah.
We've, since I've left, we were actually starting. That was one of the things we were looking at when I left office. That was one of the things we were looking at down the road as falling its deal.
And I'm talking hemp. I'm not talking,
and hemp is, there's a couple of things with hemp is, the market fell out of it last year, as you may have known, across the board.
Well, because they overproduced it and they had nowhere to send it. There was no supporting industry.
And that's the problem. I mean, you can't produce something. Nobody's going to produce something more than once for which there's no way of getting it to market. And
it's
so
a catch-22 right now.
Yeah. So, but I agree with you in because of potentially it's one of the best crops that best cash crops you could get involved with. It is a lot more labor intensive than some of the things other things you can grow. There's still a lot it's a new industry, so there's not a lot of equipment to be able to work at different levels of that of harvesting and maintaining. I've got 40 acres right now that I'm waiting on it to get there. But Oklahoma still doesn't have all the regulation. We're still a pilot state. So although it's legal, for hemp, although it's legal because the feds are still dragging their feet, we can't, we can't grow. And we thought we'd be able to do that last year, and we're not able there yet. So there's some real potential in it. One of the things I'm looking forward to is industrial hemp.
Yep.
As opposed to hemp grown for CBD oil, because
that's what I'm talking about. Is industrial.
It may not produce the dollars, the dollars per ton, but I'm looking. Hopefully, it can be grown in Oklahoma in our weather conditions, on reasonable scale, and actually be able to produce reasonable amount of income for people. Because one of the things that it would fit some of the agricultural models that we've used here, in the sense that you lease land and farm it, and that would be a way of aggregating and getting the acreage you need to really be able to to get into the business. The issue is going to be the issue is process. It's all it's classic chicken and egg problems. You need processing to be able to get it to markets. You can't have a processor unless you have people willing to people growing, and people aren't willing to grow unless they can. There have been people who've done it, and last year was in the last couple of years, in 2019 in particular is probably the worst. Is there was no place to sell it, and people just the bottom dropped out, and the ones who had successful crops, most of them had to eat it.
Yep.
And
so
farmers aren't willing to do too much of that.
Nope. And that's where the supporting industry has to come from. And that's what I'm talking about, is manufacturing industry, where it's, once the hemp is harvested, it's one thing to grow it and harvest it. Then it's got to be processed. It's got to be separated. It's got to be processed so that it can go on to more processing facilities. For instance, hemp-based plastics, they need to be processed into the pellets. And I mean, this is technology that exists. It's not new pie in the sky stuff. I mean, hemp plastic is here. It's biodegradable. You can make all different levels of it, stuff that'll last for years and years and years, that you need to last. And then you've got stuff that'll degrade in a matter of days, like straws and things like that. And the plastic industry is hasn't even touched it yet. And that's because of exactly what you said. So it's going to take investment. It's going to take, somebody's going to have to come up with the funds to put these processing facilities together. And like you said, the best way to do that is a consortium. So all you tribes out there with all the money, get together and put a hemp consortium together. And I'll help you. I'll be your spokesperson.
He can't.
I really think it's a solution. My first one is Mars. Get Mars going, because that's California. California's got a near and dear place to my heart, because that's we've got all these aerospace companies out here that they shut down. McDonnell Douglas, Boeing, Hughes, all those companies shut down. The amazing thing about it is, which has got me baffled out here in California, is that they've never reopened any of those places or mowed them down to build homes, because land in California, especially Southern California, is like gold. That stuff's high dollar, expensive. So when these big aerospace companies shut down, I thought for sure they're mowing those things down. They're going to put up condos, and they didn't. They're still sitting there dormant, waiting to reemerge as something. So I think something's brewing in that area, because they would have already mowed these things down. They've been sitting there for 15 years doing nothing.
Hey, can I change the subject just a little bit?
No more economics.
Well, Leonard, I wanted to ask you, my nation, Choctaw Nation, is very proud of being a Christian nation. They are very proud that.
We're going to flip over to that, huh?
They assimilated. I say that with a little bit of an attitude. Where our neighbors, like the Creek Nation and others, they've retained their stomp dances, their songs, and the Choctaw Nation celebrates more the fact that they were able to retain their language through Christian hymns. And Seminole also came from the east on the Trail of Tears and made a new home there. Did that change your cultural practices? Were you all also heavily missionized, or how did you all resist or assimilate to the new world order?
Well, we didn't actually get settled into a land base of our own really until 1866. And for the period of 1866 until, I'll say 1907, though it really wasn't quite that long, we were left alone. So we were able to reestablish our culture, our community, our economy, our government for ourselves in a new land, and it became uniquely ours. Seminole. We speak a Muscogee language, or actually several languages that are derived from Muscogee that came with us from Florida. Now it's primarily Muscogee, or a blend of the old and one. Culturally, well into the 20th century, our culture was dominated by our traditional ground structure. We did have churches that were emerging. The Presbyterians arrived in the 1850s and had some presence there, and that presence grew over time. We're part. The majority of our people by the 1960s were Christian, and there's a book out about the role of the churches in actually stabilizing and maintaining our culture well beyond time period when the traditional grounds are really forced to kind of stay in the background. But we still have for most of my lifetime, we've had a strong traditional base, as well as Christian churches. And our churches, for the most part, up until again about 1980 more or less, all the services were conducted in the native language. Our structure of our churches was very similar to the structure of our grounds. The way everything worked was very similar. So other than the songs and the message, so to speak, of was Christian in nature. The culture and how we worship in terms of organizations and how we came together was more Seminole and more native than it was non-Indian. So people went, depending on where you were, people kind of went back and forth between traditional and church. I do that now. I don't really practice either one to a great degree. I go to church. We'll go to the grounds, during ceremonial times, help family there, support their efforts. And what, if anything, what I would say is, like most of the country, there's just not a great deal of participation in either one. And it's just, I guess, in, the way we approached the Christian faith, and I guess most people, but certainly the way we approached it, it was a lifestyle. It wasn't, you go to church on Sunday and you do anything else you want to until you go back next Sunday, and go through it again, and you just leave it at the door and you go. Because it was such, and our traditional way of life is the same way. It requires a commitment of you to be part of that, really, and the demand was a commitment. And I'd say, I guess most of us just don't want to give that level of commitment, anymore. Certainly, in an environment where there were so many other things, distractions, it's been a lot more difficult to maintain. And some of the approaches, the traditional approaches to Christian church, for example, really haven't connected as well in our community with our youth, in that over the last 2 or 3 generations, and that's made it difficult unless you have an really active program. And that, the sad part about it, tends to come and go with individuals. You get an individual in a church who was really active and that used to a really strong youth program. That person, leaves that church for one reason or another, or passes on, and then you don't see the sustained effort that you see in the larger churches around the country. I've been pleased in the sense that when I go to the traditional grounds, our last remaining traditional ground, there's a lot of young people there, among the people who are participating. It's still not the numbers you'd like to see, but it's when I was chief, that was one of the things that really was pleasing, is that you had a lot of younger people participating. Again, though, the time commitment demands of the society around us makes it difficult, for people to give the time and effort that was demanded in earlier times.
Yeah, that's true, and I don't think we acknowledge that too much.
But it is one of the tenets, I believe, that we really have to have in order to get back to that sustaining and thriving as a people. We really need to have that faith in a relationship with our Creator that lets us know we're part of something beyond just existing as an individual and trying to determine one's self-worth in our own mind. And because you see so many things that occur in the lives of people, that suicide, addiction, a lot of that comes from people not feeling as though they're part of something bigger than themselves, and that their worth is greater than they see themselves at that time. And that comes from having a connect. To me, that comes from having connection to our Creator and to the way of life that we once had, where our spiritual, our faith in our Creator's design for us and how our lives and around us, where that was strong enough to sustain us through anything, any challenge that we might face. And that was one of the fundamental teachings that I always remember was, from both sides, both the Christian and traditional sides, that, is that, you were endowed with the strength. You just had to, ask God to help, and the strength was there, and it would be given to you, and you would not have anything you faced. If you asked God for help, you could survive and get past it and continue to thrive. And that's not really part of, I think, the majority of thinking in the United States right now. That's an element that we need to get back to as Native people.
Yeah. I mean, I have a completely, I guess I understand that everything is sacred. My oral tradition has taught me that everything is sacred, that I was sacred and I was of the Creator as I am, no matter what. I just have to be accountable to that, and I was removed from my culture at a young age, from my father who went to prison, and my grandmother, and the traditional ways of those people, of my tribal people. And I was raised in the Baptist Christian world until I was a young man, and it never sat right with me. It was too easy to, like you said, it was too easy to live one life, and then on Sunday you go do your thing, and then after Sunday was over you go back to the other thing, and it just seemed that was the norm in that culture, and it never sat right with me. And then when finally I started to learn my oral tradition and what being a traditionalist meant, and that there was nothing I had to do or change, and just me being who I was being sacred enough, that changed it all for me. And then I understood that me living my life every day, whether I was working in a factory or walking on the concrete or sitting in a building or talking into this microphone, that these things are all sacred. These things are all of the Creator. These things were all given to me, and that they're all sacred, and that I have to be accountable to that, versus having to worry about some other dogma or anything like that, And then, of course, there's our dances and our songs and our drum and all these things that remind us of all of these things, But the simple message is just, everything is sacred, everything is connected, everything is related. There is nothing greater, there is nothing lesser, and you make a difference. That's it. It's that simple of a message, being a traditionalist. And all of the other things that are just there to remind me, the drum, the pipe, the ceremonies, all the lodge, going up on the hill, all of these things are just there, like a Bible is supposed to be there for the Christian faith. All of those ceremonies and things are to remind me of my faith and the teachings of my faith and what they are. And those resonate with me, and they always have. And my children, it's resonated with them because they've been taught, and those things have been passed on to them. So I think that that's definitely one thing that our youth need to understand, and I think a lot of them do. I mean, our powwows out here in California, we have pretty good sized population out here at the powwows, and a lot of these traditionalists, think the same way. I know that it's different. It's different back east. It's different back home in Louisiana. I know that the Caddos, there's like Shannon was saying, the Choctaws, there's a mix of the churches and the tribal views and traditional views, and it's a little different than it is out here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I think the accountability for your actions within a spiritual context, and understanding that you're part of that context. Accountability for your actions is actually the key thing that we need to come away from, is and be able to pass on, and have that become the governing force, I guess, in our interactions with people and their interactions with us. And that's probably the biggest problem for Native people over the years is, we're taught to behave one way, and the rest of the society doesn't behave that way. and that's kind of the underlying tone that governs all the things we've talked about, the interrelationship with other people who are not Native, and it's and those things we have to continue to work through those to get to where we want to be. That's one of the aspects that has to be addressed and worked with. We have to be accountable, but we also have to understand that other people may not see things
the way we do. They never have.
Yeah.
They never have, and that's one of the big problems.
Yes, that's the issue.
Well,
They don't have the same feelings for the things that we revere. They look at the things that we revere as something to exploit, It's a way to put that into context. I was talking to somebody, a white person, about, Mount Rushmore. They were, why are the Indians so mad about Mount Rushmore and this and that? And I said, what do you mean? Why are they angry? I said, well, I seen one of them, this girl, she had a picture and she was throwing her middle finger up to, the Mount Rushmore. That's so disrespectful. And, and then I had to turn it around and say, I pulled up, if I have a picture of it that I keep on our show, like sometimes I put it in the background. But the Sacred Black Hills of Sapas and the picture of the before picture of those hills before they carved those faces on it. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but if you look at that picture, it's the grandfathers. If you look, the reason they carved those faces up there was because there were all of these elders' faces naturally were in those mountains, and those were sacred hills. And they said, oh, wow, look at those, look like faces. It would be really easy for us to carve faces up in there. And that's what they did. But I tried to put it in perspective to this person who was a Christian. And I said, imagine you had Mount Sinai and the Indian people went out there and said, you know what? We're going to blow this thing up and we're going to put, a picture of Custer with a bullet hole through his head on this side of it. And then we're going to put a picture of all of our Indian leaders on the other side of it. How would that make the Jewish people feel or the Christian people feel? And then it takes it and puts it in a whole different light, because that's ludicrous to even think of somebody doing something like that to, say, Mount Sinai, but it's been looked at as a sign of disrespect if you don't respect what they did to the sacred Black Hills, So it's things like that sit with all of us that are just, those are the hard things to swallow. And they wonder why, we have people that are aimers that are out there, fighting against these things and actually being boisterous about them and getting in people's faces about them and doing, things like that. I was telling you that girl making that picture. So I don't know where I'm going with it, but it's putting all of those things into perspective for people is like a daily thing that you have to do, because they don't think like we do. They don't understand the things that we've had to understand and had to endure and had to go through and have to live with. And me being somebody who's separated and 7 generations away, but has been danced back, the elders said, 7 generations from now, like you said, 7 generations, you're going to be danced back. And here I am, an unlikely candidate where, I live in both cultures. My mom's white, my dad's native. So I could have went the other way and left the other thing behind and not had to worry about it, because being native is not an easy thing. Being native and half white is definitely not an easy thing either. So why would I choose, to do that? Because there is something that has drawn me into it. I've been danced back. I am part of what you guys said 7 generations from now would happen. I've come back and I'm here to talk about these things, to exploit all these things and tell the world, hey, these things have still gone on. They're going on today. And there's a better way for us to get through this than how we have been going through that.
Well, what I'm hoping that Red Hoop Talk can do is give us a place where we can remember, and we can remember that we're accountable to these things and share this information. Thank you for sharing that, Roy. I always appreciate it. When you get on a roll.
You know what? There was some good agricultural and economic questions in the chat that I wanted to discuss, and you had to go on this whole thing and get me all hot under the collar. And
what questions? We can always have Leonard back.
And we got Leonard here. It's not like we've got some of my friends up here, rebellious, anti-government, all that. We got Leonard here who wants to talk about some economic issues. But I just to go back real quick to that, we had our friend Sandra said we need more representation in government Congress and the Senate, and obviously we're starting to see a little, very, very small little bit of that starting to happen. We have seen Native representation here and there, but I agree. Yes, Sandra, we need more. But Chad said something. He said, this was a great discussion. Let's pull it up real quick so that we can read it. As one of the few Native AG equipment dealers, we are seeing the hemp programs being viewed as a save-all, not a complement to additional crop production. I guess that means that he's saying that it's being viewed as, and then he also said, hemp is a small plot program grown in hoop houses and then replanted similar to tobacco. But these are small batches while the USDA is approved. The FDA has not. And the FDA portion of it, like you said, is more than likely the CBD processing part of it, and the human ingestion of the oils, and I know they're very beneficial. I take CBD myself, but I'm looking more at industrial hemp and versus the FDA needs for to approve for human consumption, because industrial hemp is, I mean, my goodness, it is a miracle product. Not to change the subject too much, but I just wanted to finish that up because Chad put that in the chat room.
Thank you, Chad.
Down a little bit. Where's my ice water?
Thank you, Chad. He's from Texas, I think.
Yeah, Chad's from Texas. He's been on the show too for the last couple of times. So we've got some regular. They came back. So obviously, either they came back to see you, Shannon, or they like the show.
I think they came here for our guests. I really think it's not us, Roy. I think it's our guests. And Leonard, we're so happy to have you, and I'm truly honored. I'm always feeling blessed when I see you or Sheila. So please tell her hello.
We'll do that. And
I hope that things change soon so I can come out and say hello to y'all and see what's going on out in Oklahoma and Seminole, because there's Thai food in Seminole now. What used to be at the Taco Hut is now Mexican, American, and Thai. The last time I was there, I want to see if it's still there.
It's hard to say. A lot of things aren't going to survive this.
A lot of stuff's not going to make it.
But the Brahms will be there, and the Sonic will probably be there.
Probably so.
and I know that we didn't tout all of your accolades and positions, but you were the chief at one point, so thank you for your lifelong dedication and service to your nation and Indian country. Your resume is something to be revered. So thank you for all the work and the dedication that you've given to Indian country your whole life. We appreciate you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
All right. Well, it's been an hour and a half. Is there anything that you want to close with, Leonard? Anything you got for us special you want
to? I think we've talked about a whole range of things, other than saying I do believe that it is Memorial Day, and we really should honor all the veterans and their service and thank them for that service, and regardless of why and how, it is something that people are willing to do, and not everyone is willing to do that. So we really should pay honor and appreciate those who do, and particularly those who gave their lives in service.
Yes.
A lot of things you can look at. There's a lot of aspects of living in the United States that we could change in Indian country if we had the opportunity. But one of the things that we can say is that we've come a long way. The very fact that we were actually given a reasonable slice of the coronavirus stimulus support is an indication that one, there is still recognition of who we are as Native people and Native nations in this country. And you can go around the world, and regardless of what we might say about the United States, you can go around the world and there are places where Native people, Native nations are still struggling to achieve the recognition that we have been able to achieve and sustain here in the United States, and we need. And I, for one, am thankful for those people who are willing to go out and protect a nation that, for all its faults and all its wonderful aspects, provides us with that opportunity as Native nations to succeed and thrive. Have the opportunity to do that. Not everybody gets that chance in this world. So I thank you for the opportunity to come on the show. I'd like to talk a little bit more about the economic part, answer the questions your viewers might have if we get a chance.
We'll have you on again.
You get a slow time, just let me know, and that way we can spend a little more time talking about different aspects of the challenges in any country, because they're great and they cover all aspects of who we are. Everybody takes a different approach, and it's focusing on different aspects of what they believe is the future of their nation. And that's what it's all about, is empowering our people and giving them the tools and the resources and opportunities to chart their future wherever they may be. And there's a lot of opportunity in this world to accomplish that, and to bring our communities closer together than ever before. And our talk tonight, I'm in Oklahoma, Shannon's in Virginia, you're in California, creates an opportunity for, again, that we've never had before in terms of being able to connect with people. And we should take a look at those things. And certainly my grandkids will, in a way that I never thought about. So all we can do is try to equip them with the means to understand that they need to have a major role in determining their future. And the United States offers that, and we owe that in part to the people who have come before us and fought for those rights. So I'd like to close with that statement and say thank you to all our veterans, and honor appreciation to all those who have given their lives to support this country. Thank you.
Thank you, Leonard. Thank you. Appreciate you. All right, Shannon, you have any last announcements you want to make? Leonard, I'm just going to pull you down if you wouldn't mind just hanging out in the back here for a minute. Wow, that was awesome.
Yes.
Did I embarrass you? No?
Me?
No.
Embarrass me? What? Are you kidding?
I was talking about Mars and all kinds of stuff. It was getting
well,
crazy.
I'm still waiting for you to
Indians on Mars, baby. Indians on Mars.
And start your own, who knows what.
I know. And hemp's different than the weed, girl. You know that, right?
Absolutely.
It's not like the dank, it's the stinky dank. It's like it's hemp's different. It's different. I know you're from over there and you're all goody two shoe and everything, but it's not not the sticky icky.
Right.
I'm talking about industrial hemp. Hey, so Chad, I want to let me shout out the chat room real quick. Chad, if you would get a hold of my sister Shannon here, we'd love to talk to you. You sound like you've got some Indian country industrial background there. So get in touch with us. We'd like to get you on the show. Maybe how's that sound? So get in contact with us. All right, sis.
Yes, let's make sure we mention the Association on American Indian Affairs.
Of course, our sponsors are
country.
Yep.
And for producing this show, thank you all for coming to listen and hanging out with us for a while. Remember our accountability.
And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, because that gets us known. That gets our algorithm going. That gets the Facebooks and the Twitters and the YouTubers out there knowing who we are, so that we can get more guests and more people and have all of you out there be part of it. So like, comment, subscribe, please.
Yes, please. And would you please tell us who our guest will be next week?
I can't tell you that yet because I don't know. So they got to Navajo and they are distributing the gloves, masks, and sanitizers and things that they had gathered here, and they took them out there. They caravanned out there. It was a success. It was all. I sent you did you see the link?
I saw his Facebook.
Yeah, so they were all they put it on Facebook. So they had delivered all that stuff out there, and it was successful. and now I know that they're hanging out in Navajo land with those folks for a day or so, and then they're supposed to be coming back. So I'm waiting to see if that's going to be done in time for him to get back. And so if not, we'll have somebody else.
You're not even going to mention who it is, because if he's not going to be able to come next week, he'll come. We'll get him on sometime.
Yeah, we'll mention it later.
Okay.
We'll mention it later.
It's a secret, I guess.
Okay.
Well.
All right. Thanks.
And Roy, you better have Plan B. If Plan A ain't working, you better.
We'll make something happen. We always do, right? This is Indian country, right? It's on our time. We show up when we want, and we will have what we need when it comes time.
My watch, you know better than that.
All right. Everybody, thank you. Peace out. We'll see you guys all next week.
All right.
Red Hoop Talk.